Hi there, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sue.
And we're the mother-daughter duo behind Chatter Matters.
Each week, we're going to be chatting through everyday challenges and how we navigate them as two women from different generations.
So get yourself comfy, grab your cup of tea or coffee, and let us show you why Chatter Matters. Welcome back to another episode of Chatter Matters, and this week we're going to be talking about the rise of women's sport and all our thoughts on it. But before we get started, Mum, why don't we start with our check-in? How's your week gone? How are you doing? What have you been up to?
I've had a very nice week, thank you, Amy.
Good.
Again, a mixture of some really nice work, but also some pleasure.
Ooh, spicy.
Not that sort of pleasure, I don't think. More that I've had some time. I actually had a really lovely day. I went for a day's walk with my friend. We've committed to walking the North Downs Way during this year. So doing it on day walks.
Very nice.
So it's between like 11 to 15 miles a day. So it was 5 hours of walking. We had beautiful weather. So yeah, that was my highlight.
Gorgeous. And if you were to rate it out of 10?
What, my week?
Yeah.
Probably an 8 out of 10. It was a
Nice.
solid
That's
8 out of 10.
Week.
Yeah,
That's a solid score to give your week.
Yeah.
Good.
And yours?
Good, really good. I mean, so exciting progress with the flat because all of the paperwork has come in and manically signing all that off and sending it back to my solicitor. And I mean, yesterday I had to send over all the money, which was...
How scary is that?
That is truly, I've never felt so just sick to my bones. Just the idea of like, what if I can't read? And I've typed in, I can't read and I can't type and I can't cross-check and it's all just gone wrong and the money is lost forever. But it's not lost forever.
You managed it.
I did manage it. After a very stressful 35-minute call with my bank, though, being like, are you sure you're not getting scammed? And to the point you then end up questioning yourself, am I getting scammed? But hey, we got to the other side of it.
Yay,
and
well
the
done.
money has been received, which is good. So hopefully we're going to complete in 2 days' time.
Wow, that would be amazing.
So, when people tell you that when it unlocks and it just moves fast, I don't think I fully understood that like it truly does suddenly just get moving and then you'll really have to get your act in gear. But I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm just like, just the perennial cynic in me is like, but it's never going to work on time and it's going to get delayed again. But we'll see.
We'll see. Well, hopefully in next week's episode, we can talk about...
Touch wood.
Yeah, you moving in. So yeah, touch wood.
Yeah, absolutely. But apart from that, so that's been very exciting. That's taken up a lot of thought space in my head this week. But apart from that, work has been good. Work has been busy. And yeah, nothing major to report really. I've read some good books. I've actually been on a really good spree of books lately. I'm nearly caught back up to my target for this year, which I'm excited about. But yeah,
Great.
it was a nice steady week.
Great. And you did also go out, didn't you?
I did.
Which is links to this episode.
It did. Yeah, so it was ages ago, my friends and I think I mentioned this in the last episode. I'm absolutely obsessed with Ilona Maher. And if you don't know who Ilona Maher is, she is a bronze medal winning Olympian in the US women's rugby sevens team. But she's also a bit of an internet personality. And did Dancing with the Stars and has done cover of Sports Illustrated, is the most followed rugby player out of men and women on social media, which I think is iconic. She's absolutely hilarious, but she's come over to the UK to play rugby. So ages ago, my friends and I bought tickets because she was coming to our local team stadium. And it happened to be on Valentine's as well. So it was a cute little Galentine's trip for us three single girlies. And And it was just so much fun.
Yeah, I watched it on the on the TV, which was really
Yeah.
lovely, and there were lots of cowboy hats and pink everywhere, which was really cute to see.
I mean, my favourite moment was in the stands when Chapel Roan Hot to Go came on and the girlies turned out for that, you know, all of us doing our HOTTOGO, you know, doing our hands and everything, which was just, all of us were like, yes, the girls have turned out correctly for this match.
When I was watching it, the bit that I was struck by, which I absolutely loved, was it was just on show with just these powerful women. You know, often, I don't know, women role models are skinny and tall and beautiful, but there were some
Powerhouses.
gorgeous women out there, but strong
Yeah.
and powerful and covered in mud, and I loved it. It was just such a different vision of what a woman can be, and it just had power. That's what the word that I had in my head was amazing to see a different shape of body. And people being excited about watching women that are a different shape of body.
Well, and that's the thing, like, it was a fantastic game of rugby. Like, one of the girls that I went with has never watched rugby before. This was actually her first game, not just live, but just ever of watching it. And one, loved that I was able to introduce her to rugby through a women's game. Like, that just feels like feminism's winning. But, you know, she just loved it. She thought it was a fantastic game. And I just... For the quality of the women's game to be so high that someone could watch rugby for the first time and go, this is fun and I want to watch more of it.
Yeah.
That just speaks volumes to the skill that the women are able to show. But you're so right. Like, the power is such the right word to use, because that's exactly it. I mean, rugby is a hardcore contact sport, and these are not delicate women. They are going... I mean, I've got this incredible video of Ilona Maher matching up with Ellie Kildun, who's like the big name player for Harlequins, and everyone was so excited for them to match up because they're both very, very big names in rugby, but in social media as well. And oh god, there's just this really iconic sack that Ilona, like a massive tackle that she does on Ellie, which just the whole stands was like, yes, this is what we've paid to come and see.
You could hear all the oohs and the ahs as the tackles were going in, which was great. And I was also really impressed with the skill level. I mean, you and I watch a lot of men's rugby. I mean, we're very big men's rugby fans. But I genuinely was impressed at the strength of some of the, you know, girls in terms of their passing and their kicking game and their tackling game. I mean,
and the tactics were fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there are a few fantastic kick decisions, the tactical decisions that resulted in some really gorgeous play. But I had the exact same thing because I watched a women's game back in December. It was like a double header. And the women's game was on just before the men's. And I absolutely loved it. And again, I had that same experience of being surprised at how fun it was to watch. And I think I had a bit of a moment when I finished watching that going, why was I so surprised? And like kind of sad that I was surprised. And I guess just like, why do you think it is that we get so surprised by women's sport being of quality?
I mean, it's only really recently that mainstream sports that you would think like football, rugby, that, you know, that women have been televised, you know, that you've actually had that exposure to go, well, there's an option, I could go and watch women play. I mean, it literally is only, I don't know, 5-10 years, maybe not even 10 years, maybe
well, I feel
less
like the
than 5.
Women's Euros was a big moment for women's sport.
Yeah.
I think because the whole, at least in the UK, it's like the whole country suddenly woke up to the women's game being of quality and exciting to watch and something to get behind.
And a team to be proud of, you know, like it was top of the Euros. And men's football has not always given us that.
No, not in the UK.
not you know, the kind of success that we were like when here was this women's team that was absolutely smashing it, you know, and it allowed the country to get excited about something.
But I think you're right. I think like we often, because this is not to say that excellence in women's sport hasn't always existed, you know, like you think of like your Olympians, you know, your Serena Williams of the world and the amazing the Simone Bileses, but I think it's the Olympic cycle we tend to
Yes.
see excellence in women's sport.
Yeah.
I outing myself a bit, but I don't think there's much apart from netball. But I'm a netball player. I've always followed netball and watched the Commonwealth when it's on, and we'll tune into the Super League and that kind of thing. But I don't think growing up that it was ever the norm, apart from during the Olympics, to watch women competing in sport, unless it was something like Wimbledon. I guess tennis is the only exception.
Yeah. When I think about, if I think about 1980s, when, when I was, starting to watch sport, I think it would only be tennis players and athletes that I can remember that were female role models, the Martina Navratilova and Chrissy Evert and Billie Jean King, names that
Billie Jean King, I do know Billie Jean King.
I mean, they're all iconic, but FloJo and Tessa Sanderson.
I'm absolutely drawing a blank here. Billie Jean King, 100% icon. I'm sure the others were also icons.
They were, and were amazing, but it was tennis and athletics around the Olympic cycle or the big Grand Slams. There weren't female football teams, on the TV for mainstream, to watch.
So I guess when you were younger, back in your day, I guess then what would drive you to compete in sport then? Like, if you didn't have many role models, what was it like? Because you were very into sport when you were younger.
It would only be if you'd pick the bug up at school, so I think school exposed you to your netballs and your hockeys and your athletics and, the kind of typical stuff. And I think if you enjoyed it there, then you may have continued. But, the drop off of, and it's still the same, isn't it? The drop off of girls continuing to play sport once they leave school is really high. And it would have been the same in my day. And actually the other thing that was a big factor was there were the pay gap between professional sports women in the 80s would have been really significant. I mean, I know the tennis players,
I was going to say, like, were they even professional? Were they still considered amateurs potentially?
Yeah, I think many of them were. I mean, I don't know the details, but I remember the old football team finally getting their cap, and they'd had to fight years and years and years because they weren't even given a cap, and it was all amateur. So I think beyond the sort of tennis players, there wasn't a huge amount of professionalism of women playing in sport, which is incredibly sad.
It is, isn't it? But is that a symptom of the era, right? Which I think about, the 80s and things like, you think about 50s, 60s, 70s, the rise of the wave of feminism, but 80s really was where that comes home to roost, I guess. And so then maybe, does it make sense, whilst it's a shame, does it make sense then, I guess, that there weren't as many female athletes to get behind?
Yeah, I think the thing that has changed between our generations is social media. I think a classic media, TV, news, have suddenly realised that there's these amazing role model women who are capturing huge audience. Ilona Maher that you were talking about, hasn't she got a bigger? Ilona Maher. Hasn't she got a bigger following than Taylor Swift?
Oh God, I don't know if she's quite that far.
No, I read somewhere that she has a bigger following.
I'm going to search this up now.
Yeah, than Taylor Swift.
Fascinating. Oh, it might be over TikTok, that might be where she's got it. Because I was going to think, because I'm an Instagram girly, I'm not a TikTok girly. But yeah, I reckon potentially maybe across TikTok.
And I think I was reading somewhere that generally in social media, the women are doing better at promoting themselves than the men. And because it's, entrepreneurial, they're not relying on, your ITVs or your BBCs to give them an interview. They can control how much coverage they get because they're creating the content themselves rather than waiting for someone to say, yes, I'd like an interview with you.
Well, I think that was like, in the 2024 Olympics, I think the female athletes were the most followed athletes on social media, because they were creating so much content. I think it turned out to be British female athletes were the most followed group on social media during the Olympics. And I think you're right, there's something around female athletes nowadays building their brands and their sponsorships and things like that for themselves by themselves.
Yeah.
Rather than and like cultivating that online piece.
Yeah.
Rather than as you say, relying on traditional media to give them a voice. Because I think, you know, if I look at the world, right, I just go, well, then we'll need to take up space in order for them to give it to us.
Yeah,
completely. Because you know, it's that whole like supply and demand thing, right? It's like if people are if they will start to take more notice if in your non-traditional channels they're becoming extremely popular.
Completely. And you think about all the brand deals.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a massive following, you know, the brands are going to come knocking on your door.
Yeah.
So I do think social media for me has been, you know, a very big unlocker.
Yeah.
For women to take control and, you know, promote themselves, because other people weren't going to do that for them.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? And I think it's just such a shame that it still feels like a battle to get women's sport on mainstream media. Because, like, amazing that you were able to tune in and watch the Quins Bristol game.
Yeah.
But why does that feel like, why
are we amazed by it?
Why are we amazed by it? And I think that's the thing that I get so frustrated by. Like, why are we still so excited and want to celebrate women getting mainstream media attention for their sporting achievements? And like, yes, it is a celebration. Yes, it is an achievement, but it shouldn't have to be. Like, there's been enough proof points of this. You know, like, women's football is incredibly popular in the UK now. And a lot of that is post-Euros. Yeah. But, you know, I talk to some of my friends, and my friends are like, oh, I'll go watch a women's football game, but like I'm not that interested in going and watching a men's football game because the environment's very different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also, it's very family friendly, isn't it? And which I think is great. And the other, I looked at a stat. So I was, in terms of prepping for this, I looked at some statistics, and there was one that I came across is for in the UK, the market potential by 2030 for women's sport will be 1 billion. That's up from 350 million in 2021. So that's, you know, in 9 years, it would have moved from 350 million to 1 billion is the market.
That's huge.
So you start to think about your Nikes and your Adidases and your Sweaty Bettys and all, I mean, they all want to get in on that game, and absolutely they should, and therefore I think women will take up more space with those kind of, you know, big sponsorship deals.
Well, absolutely, you know, because like you look at, you know, the things that we've seen with like the Taylor Swift Eras tour and Beyonce's tour and things like that, and the spending power of women is huge. And so if, you know, and I am such a fan of live sport, I think partly because we've grown up as a sports family. I've played sports my whole life, but there is something so special to me about going and watching live sport. And if we can create an environment in which women feel safe to be able to go and watch it and enjoy themselves and just have a good time, and the sport is of good quality and all of these kinds of things, I'm not surprised to hear that figure's as high as it is, because the spending power of women is such a key element of today's society.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens and how it progresses. The other thing that I would love to see more of, and I know that they've started to do it in netball, and I want to see more of it, is more mixed gender sports. I would love to see more of that. Yeah. Because I also think that's a way of, rather than everything being separate all the time, actually, how do you watch the mixed relay races in the Olympics, and they're such good fun, you know, and I think certainly the audiences and the, you know, people that are spectating can get right behind that. So I would love to just see more mixed, like a mixed gender football team or a mixed gender rugby team.
Yeah.
That
well,
would
like they do, oh my God, what's the football, what's that annual event, the charity event that they do, which is like England versus rest of world celebrity
sports aid thing.
Yeah. Oh my God, what's it called? Yeah, it is like Sports Aid or Soccer Aid.
Soccer Aid.
There we go. Like, that is so much fun, and I know it's celebrities with a few professionals mixed in, but again, it's mixed teams, and it's so much fun to watch. And I mean, like, mixed netball is so much fun to play in.
Yeah.
And like, I know it's really popular out in like Australia and New Zealand, and, you know, but less so over here. But I agree, there's so much potential for mixed sport, at least from a whether it's from a watch perspective, you know, TBC, but even just more from a school perspective. Like, I feel like in primary and junior school, when you're like 11 and under, you do so much mixed sports, whereas that just seems to dry up when you hit senior school and you start reaching puberty, and it's like, God forbid you mix boys and girls when they're wearing sports kit. Hell will break loose.
But it's almost the comedy. It becomes a comedy thing, doesn't it? I know in your school, you know, you kind of had a fun thing at the end of the year, which was kind of, isn't it funny that boys are playing netball? But they actually really enjoyed playing it.
It was always a highlight. They were all like, we had so much demand that, so normally it was like boys from the first rugby team would play the girls in the first netball team. We had 3 games going. Was it 3 or 2? I can't remember. We had multiple games going because so many boys wanted to take part. But to your point of like, it was like a charity event. It was like a funny thing.
Yeah.
But the boys got so competitive.
Yeah,
they were like
wanted
strategizing. I mean, I think some of them asked for like a netball session beforehand so that they could like show up well. But you're so right. Like, I think sport in schools has so much opportunity to be that gateway. And I think it is so successful in some cases, you know, and it really works for some people. But also, I think specifically in the case of women and girls, you like you said earlier, it's like you really have to catch the bug in order to keep doing it. Yeah,
I mean, you know, again, the stats that I were looking at in terms of the drop off of girls was really sad. So the biggest dropout in teenage years in the UK, again, for 43% of girls who once considered themselves as sporty, then disengage from sport. So 43% disengage from sport. And then in Australia, they were talking about 15 to 17-year-olds, 50% of them stop.
Wow. And you think of Australia and New Zealand as like preeminent sporty nations.
Yeah. And for me, it's so sad that girls, you know, stop playing, because sport is, for me, yes, it's good for your, you know, well-being and for your mental health, your physical health, but certainly from my side, and I've watched it with you too, is the idea of playing in a team, you know, helps you in later life. It gives you leadership opportunities. You know, you get to lead something, you get to follow successes, and, you know, learning to be a good loser, and all of that stuff is really
a massive
important.
thing that I've always taken with me is like respecting my seniors.
Yeah.
You know, like I had a bit of fear of my netball coach, but a very, very, very healthy dose of respect. And actually, I think that in itself is knowing when and how to take direction, and sometimes, you know, and to not necessarily take it personally. You know, that like you can be given direction on how to be better, but it doesn't mean you're bad. But
I think this is where mums need to play a really big role in encouraging their daughters to keep going with sport. You know, even if you don't play yourself, I think just continuing to get your daughters to love sport, even when they start to get more body conscious, you know, their periods start, and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. I think mums have got a really big role to just keep encouraging their daughters to participate in sport and not to give up on it.
And I think that's something that you always did so well. But I think part of that was because you saw the value of sport in your life. And I, you know, ever since I can remember, because I know you were still playing. Well, actually, you know what? Pause. What sports did you grow up playing, and what were your favourites?
So I played netball and I played hockey, and I also ran. I was in athletics until, I think, by the age of about 15. I used to sprint, and then I got really slow. So that didn't help. But I always played netball and I played hockey. And then when I left school, my chosen sport was hockey. So I went and joined a club outside of school, and that's what continued. And I actually carried on playing you know, until I had children. After you, I went back and played again, but then after your brother, I then stopped. But it was always it was a social thing. It was the way I met friends. It was an outlet. You know, it ticked so many boxes of kind of, you know, and still now I try and lift weights. I try and stay and be healthy. I'm not playing any competitive sport now, because I think the last time I tried to play
Yes.
netball, I ruptured my Achilles, didn't I?
It was I swear it was the first game back that you went to go and play. I must have been like, what, 12?
Yeah.
And like, I remember Dad being like, don't take it too far. Like, just go and enjoy yourself. Don't take it too far. And we get a phone call. Did we even get a phone call? No, because you drove home with a ruptured Achilles, didn't you?
Because I was so embarrassed that the very thing that your dad had said to do, I then went and did. I got my mind remembered how I used to play, and my body wasn't quite up to it. So yeah, I drove back with a ruptured Achilles. And
you were in like a boot for 6 weeks or something like that, weren't you?
It was a long time. I remember you were all upstairs, and I kind of crawled up the stairs and burst into tears and went, "I'm so sorry." So yes, since then my team competitive days have been over.
Doesn't have to be over though. Rise and walk and netball.
That's true. I can't quite get my head around it. I may do one day.
Okay, I'm campaigning for Mum to go back and do walking netball or back to netball.
So from your experience, why do girls stop, do you think? So we talked about the kind of body, you know, going through teenage years. Are there other reasons why you think girls stop?
I think there are just so many. I think so I grew up basically playing any sport I could get my hands on. But again, like you, predominantly did netball, hockey, and then athletics as well. I'm renowned for not being particularly good at sports when a bat or racket is involved. So hockey, I did it, but I wasn't very good at it. But netball's my chosen sport. But I think what I watched growing up was, unless you're considered good, unless you're on the in crowd of the sports, seen as quote unquote sporty, it's not desirable to keep trying, and I think that's a real miss. You know, in the and potentially that was the school that I went to, in the environment they created, which was competitive, but you know, it was always you trained and you played to win rather than you played and trained to have fun. At least was my experience of it. So I think that's one part of it. And like teenage girls, you're dealing with enough as it is, from your body changing, your hormones changing. You know, friendships at school are just wild. And there's, you know, to then layer on potentially, if you don't see yourself as quote unquote good enough to be sporty, and you're not being encouraged or enabled to just have fun with it, I'm not surprised people drop out, because it's like, well, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I don't feel good about myself and I don't feel, you know, potentially not having fun. And I think that's what I would love to see at schools, is different types of sports on offer, that it's not always your traditional netballs, footballs, hockeys, you know, and that more variety where it's possible is offered. We then come back to obviously funding issue with schools, which I'm not going to get into, but that, I think it's when there are so many boxes that you already have to fit in as a teenager. If you don't perfectly fit into one of the sports boxes, it's so hard to continue to find a love of it, because you'll find other things to fill your time that do make you feel good.
And I guess also there's the whole academic pressure, you know, like, do you feel like you have to choose your studying over sport, you know, and then there's the pressure of needing to succeed, so potentially girls choose the academic route.
And I'm seeing that in the netball club that I play in at the moment. We've got a number of 17 and 18-year-olds, and one of them is already, you know, stressing that she doesn't know if she's going to have enough time to be able to commit to netball and to be able to do her A-levels to the standard at which she wants to do them, which again, I'm never going to get, you know, we're never going to get in the way of someone who wants to reach their academic potential. But it's just such a shame when it's like, oh, it's only a few hours out of your day. Actually, this is really good for you, but also would, you know, you hope that she's having fun and enjoying herself. So
I guess there's the role, you know, for, I think, the role that mums can play right at the time when their daughters might be choosing not
Yeah.
to? You know, how do you keep encouraging them? How do you keep supporting them?
Yeah. I think something that
to do
you
that.
always did really well was you never forced me to take part in a sport that I didn't want to. Like once, you always encouraged me to try it, like tried cricket.
Yeah.
Cricket wasn't for me, but I tried it.
Yeah.
And you never ever made me feel like I had to play hockey. Once I'd realised I did not enjoy it, I didn't want to play it, there was never any pressure to invest more time in it than I necessarily needed to. And I think that was great, because then when I did show an interest in something, you turned up to my matches.
Yeah.
You helped me get to places. You found a netball club that I enjoyed, and when I found that a bit tricky because I was finding it a bit overwhelming, you came and sat on the sidelines of our training. Because I really struggled with my netball club when I first joined. Just I'd never, as a goody two shoes child, I'd never been shouted at my entire life. So having a loud and shouty coach was terrifying to me. But you recognised that I enjoyed the game, and so you sat with me and you sat on the sidelines of those training sessions so that I felt safe, to the point where I actually then knew what to expect and I could handle it and I could go by myself. So I think fundamentally it's just you showed up for me and you showed up for my interest.
Yeah. And I think if I was to pass on any kind of advice to any kind of mums, it would be just be interested, and just be there and support and go along and watch and encourage, I think, as much as possible. So what would your last kind of summary on, if you were selling women's sport as something that is enriching in life, what would you say?
Oh God. I mean, so I think sport has it's opened so many doors for me, in the way that from the basics of, like, I know how to move my body to feel healthy, and I know how strong I am and how fast I can move, and but there's also something about, I know that I can push through my limits, and I can, as in, push my limits and get stronger, fitter, faster. I've got amazing friends that I've made through the teams that I've been in, and it was one of my first things when we moved up here, was that I found a netball team to go and join, and I've got some really great friends from that team that I go to the gym with and that I do competitions with and that kind of thing, and I think it's just it lets you be it lets me be a version of me that I don't get to be at work very often, and I don't get to be in my social life. Like, I get to be this unapologetically strong, powerful, doesn't take any crap, just goes ball to the wall with effort, and it's just like a bit of a, not a feral side of me, because I'm not that kind of sports person, but as in, like, you just get to let loose in a way that I just don't normally get to let loose on the day to day. And I think there's something so liberating about that, that it's worth hanging out for, I would say.
So there's a we started talking about the rise of women's sport, and I think the grassroots sport is critically important to keep feeding great women, and so that we keep having the role models and we continue the progression that we're on right now.
Absolutely, and it's not just a grassroots sport, but it's the sport for fun.
Yeah.
I'm a naturally very competitive person and have always been very into sport, so have competed competitively. But actually just broadening that out so there's more options of sport for fun. That it doesn't have to be this uber competitive, play to win, train to win, like.
There's the one advert that I was looking at before we came on, which I remember very clearly, and it was done in 2014. I hadn't realised how old it was, but Always did it, which was sanitary pads, and it was called Run Like a Girl. And if you haven't seen that, please Google it, because it always makes me choke up when I watch that. It's
very powerful,
such a powerful advert, and I think it also felt like it was quite seminal that a company selling a product, of course, but championing young women, young girls, in sport, and to feel powerful in their bodies.
Well, and and their whole message, right, is that play like a girl is not a negative thing.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I'm loving with rise of women's professional sport on social media and TV is that it's showing that girls can play just as good as boys. You can play like a girl, and you can be brilliant, and you can be strong, and you can be powerful, and you can have fun, and you can enjoy yourself, and all of these things that I don't think that can get lost.
Yeah.
And I just think it's very, very, very cool that it is having a moment, and it's rising to the top as it rightly should.
Yes, and so we should support it.
Absolutely.
Go and watch it, and encourage our kids to do it. And I think just
even if you have
supporting.
25-year-olds who still play netball, and you still come along and watch them play netball too, because even 25-year-old girls need their mummy to come along and cheer them on as well.
I know, but I normally get roped into scoring.
That's
think
true.
When I come and watch you.
I think when you came along to score once, your eyes were like saucers, like, what in the mystical, magical thing do I need to do with this?
But I learned how to score.
Did a very good job of scoring. You got complimented by my coach.
Alrighty, so next week could be a big week for you.
Oh my God, I oscillate between being so excited and just absolutely terrified. But it could be a very big week.
Yes.
Could be a very big week indeed.
The real start of this transition that we talked about right at the beginning, which is you moving out.
Yeah.
And then I have to get my head around being on my own.
Whenever I tell people, like, oh my God, like my house might be going through, the first response, genuinely, to most people that I've told have gone, and how's your mum finding that? How's your mum dealing with that? My old manager, when I was having a catch up with her this week, she was like, I'm so excited for you, but like, how's your mum doing?
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Well, it's a big week for you next week as well, then, I guess.
Well, I think you're still going to be toing and froing, and I'm sure I'm going to be having a paintbrush in my hand. So helping out and lugging boxes around. So I'm excited for that. Great. Alrighty, let's give it a wrap, and then we will be back again next week.
We will be back again next week, and as always, you can drop us a message on Instagram or send us an email if you've got anything you want us to chat about.
Yeah, and if there's any comments you've got, your thoughts on women's sport or areas that we've touched on that we would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts about the rise of women's sport?
Absolutely. Fabulous. Right, we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.